a pretty full agenda. Yeah, there's something. Okay, so we're going to call to order the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting is now commenced. It's May 2nd at 1 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. Commissioners are present and online. For those who are participating remotely, we ask that you mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid background noise and feedback. For those who have dialed using the call-in number to unmute, speak dial *6 on your phone, and that you only use the chat function to request to speak. Also, to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way.
We can't hear you yet.
Maggie,
Present.
thank you. Wendy Asher is absent, I believe. Marianne Beerling.
Present.
Mindy Bernstein.
Present.
Mark Clark. Present. Vicky Casino. Is absent. Lori Mazzurbo. Lori's absent. Tisha Tallman.
Here.
Jim Topol, I'm here. Ray Mitch. Ray.
Present.
Kenny Wong. And Jay Young. Okay, so first order of business is to approve our.
Can we take care of the echo IGA?
Yeah.
Our April 4th meeting minutes, which were distributed. Are there any changes to
We'll be here.
We just, I think, need to pause for a second, Jim.
Yeah, because when could you mute yourself really quick?
the other side of the room?
So.
Okay,
Can we
while we're
try
meeting,
this one?
just double check the meeting last month, please.
Audio also, like if you go to that little arrow, you can say remove audio.
That's what we're trying to do here.
Now pinch
Your
hitting.
audio.
Say again.
We have a lot of the same problems with the camera.
Hello?
They've owl.
Ironically, this is the echo canceling microphone. Is that better? No.
Okay, so speaker.
Yeah, ironically. Is that? Is this better? Turned it down.
What's the microphone?
The echo canceling speakerphone.
That's the speaker. What's the microphone?
The microphone.
Same as. Yeah. Try that.
Go down, go down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. No. Because we can still hear it here.
You separate audio, but no. Is that better?
We have to have both laptops?
Well, the microphone's taking from Neto's laptop and it's not taking from mine for whatever reason.
What's your laptop doing?
I'm sharing my screen on here.
Can you give?
I'll give it to Neto. Yeah.
Do all that.
Okay.
He likes to have control on
There it is. So,
it.
you're gonna have to move a little bit. Can anyone hear us? Okay, can someone talk into the microphone?
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, Mindy's talking. We can't hear her. Sorry about this, everybody. We're in a different room than what we're used to.
I'm hearing something out of here.
Hmm?
I'm hearing something out of there.
Yeah, that's where the speaker is. So everyone can hear. Okay. You mute my-
What I was saying is, I don't understand.
Can you talk again? Can you hear us?
Yep.
That's weird.
See, I'm wondering because we have,
So, hey, Neto?
Yes.
So point of clarification, the committee updates are not on the agenda. I thought that, yeah, there's two, so we can't go through committee updates today?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, we're gonna have to share this then.
So the housing subcommittee finally got its act together and came up with, our version of what we did in the retreat. Can we send it out by email? Approval for the.
Well, so the goals are on here, so that's the third agenda item, but the committee updates, which is this document,
Oh.
is not on here, so we technically can't do this. And the mayor and council update, I didn't do because I thought we were doing this. So I don't have to be prepared for
Well,
that.
maybe
either.
we can call this man and council.
This is like, and it's more, it's gotta be more than this. Are we good to go?
Could somebody in the Zoom meeting talk again? We can see if it's coming through.
Mindy, can you say something, please?
This is Maggie. Mindy's off screen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the echo's gone. Okay, let's continue. Okay, so are there any changes to the April 4th meeting minutes? Okay, then without objection, we will approve the meeting minutes. Right. Call to the audience. Call the audience is limited to 3 minutes per speaker and a total of 10 minutes. All speakers must share their name and be recorded in the meeting minutes. Remember, the call to audience may not result in discussion with members of CEHD. No legal action may take place during the call to audience, and speakers may not be disruptive. CEHD members may only respond to criticism and request that items be placed on future agenda for discussion. Members of the audience may still participate on agenda items as per the bylaws of CEHD. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Is it Ben?
He doesn't have his hand up.
Ben does?
Does not.
Does not. Is there anybody who would like to speak?
No one else in the audience.
Okay, then we'll move to the next agenda item, which is a CEHD goal. So maybe we can talk about this, or do we need to push back?
We need to push it.
Okay. Are there any objections to moving this down after Corin's update?
She just texted me, she's 10 minutes away.
Okay. Any objections?
No,
Okay, then we're gonna make an adjustment to the agenda, and the CEHD goals will be done after the planning development services update. Corin, are you ready?
Sure.
Great, thank you.
You're gonna make her co-host.
one more time, please.
Okay, so looks like everyone can see the screen. So at the last meeting, there was a couple of things that came up that we wanted to provide an update on. So there was a request to get an update on some code development, code updates that PDSD is working on, some of which come from recommendations from the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. So I want to give an update on that. And then the second item, looks like I can't do this. But not dancing. I'm just gonna do it without full screen mode. Sometimes that works better. Okay. All right. Can you guys still see, even though it's like a little smaller? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so two things I want to talk about today. One is the corridor redevelopment tools, which is a package of code updates we're working on. And then second, which is a quicker update, is just an update on development review fees, because that was a question or discussion point that came up during the last meeting in the call to the audience, as well as discussion by the commission. So first I'll go over what we're calling our corridor redevelopment tools. And this really comes from a couple of things. And the first recommendation that really inspired this package is the recommendations from the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development to Mayor and Council last February. You guys probably remember putting together the 5 recommendations to Mayor and Council, and one of those was zoning changes to facilitate more affordable housing. Soon after that, actually, Mayor and Council asked for a study session on tools for redevelopment of underutilized sites. So Mayor and Council then kind of took it even more broad to how can we look
I'm sorry for interrupting. Could you just speak a little slower? It's kind of hard to keep up with you. Thank you.
No problem. So Mayor and Council initiated a project to look at tools for redevelopment of underutilized sites more broadly across the city. So we kind of combine those into a package to look at underutilized sites, tools for redevelopment, as well as further incentives for affordable housing as part of that package. Also last summer in August, Mayor and Council had a study session on zoning and building regulations for tiny homes. So that's another aspect of kind of the housing spectrum that we're looking at with this code package. So some of the goals as part of this project: 1, remove barriers to affordable housing. That's really one of our key goals, is looking at tools to incentivize affordable housing development. Also promote transit-oriented infill development to support climate action goals. Update our zoning to make it easier to permit the full spectrum of housing types, including tiny homes, missing middle housing, and multifamily and workforce housing. Also, looking at ways to simplify redevelopment of underutilized and vacant sites. Sometimes it's not zoning, but just process. That can be one of the barriers. So we also want to build on existing tools. So across the city, we have a lot of tools already in our toolkit. The Downtown Infill Incentive District, for example, has facilitated the development of over 1,200 units of housing, about 30% of which are affordable. So that's been a really powerful tool for transit-oriented development, infill, and affordable housing. We also have urban overlay districts, which includes Main Gate, the Sunshine Mile, Grant Road overlay. Those have also been very effective at helping create housing and affordable housing. Our individual parking plan is a tool to reduce parking requirements that can be used on any site near transit for any affordable housing project. And then last year in our code streamlining package, we also made a number of zoning reforms to facilitate redevelopment of sites and support housing options. So these are some tools that we're really trying to build on and learn from these in terms of what has worked well. What has been really effective about the Downtown Infill Incentive District, about our overlay districts, and how can we take some of those tools and apply them more broadly citywide? So that's one of the things we're looking at with this. To start this project, we started with kind of an analysis phase last summer and fall. So we started off by doing a market assessment of corridors across the city, which I'll give a brief overview of. And then from that, we also looked at, or as part of that analysis, we also looked at our zoning code, overlays, development patterns to understand barriers to development. And have had a focus group discussion with developers, designers, and other folks in the development field to understand kind of their perspectives on what some of the barriers are. Mindy, do you have a question before I go further?
No, I'm sorry. I raised it to ask you to speak slower. Forgot to put it down. Thank you.
No problem. So one of the first things we did was look at corridors across the city. We identified kind of some key corridors to conduct their analysis, and we looked at a lot of indicators. So just to give you an example, some of the things we looked at are the presence of strip commercial centers. Those are often opportunity sites for redevelopment. We looked at where we have vacant parcels around the city. That's the map on the right. You can kind of see that's definitely kind of around the periphery. We looked at the density of parking lot acreage across the city. We looked at transit access. So these are just a couple of many indicators that we looked at to look at which of our corridors have the most opportunity for redevelopment, and then on those corridors, where are there sites that have opportunity for redevelopment. We classified different corridors into kind of by a set of characteristics to look at where we have corridors with similar characteristics where similar tools might be effective to spur redevelopment. So we looked at the downtown area as its own corridor with very unique kind of characteristics and development patterns as an employment hub and an area that's seen a lot of development. Then we looked at high activation corridors, which are kind of our active commercial areas where we are seeing a lot of development activity. Moderate activation corridors that have a little more vacant sites, areas with opportunity for redevelopment, and then low activation areas that have more underutilized land. And then within those, we looked at opportunity sites and looked at a number of criteria, including current land use, zoning, size, transportation access, ownership, et cetera, to identify opportunity sites across the city and look at where those are concentrated by corridor, but also by zone. So what zone are a lot of those opportunity sites in? We actually found that a lot of those opportunity sites are within existing commercial and mixed use zones, which means they hypothetically have the zoning to allow commercial development, which includes multifamily, but a lot of them, aren't being redeveloped. So what are those barriers in our zoning that even though they're zoned for multifamily and mixed use, we're not seeing development kind of outside some of the core parts of the city. We're looking at opportunity sites across the city, ideally on frontage, with frontage on existing arterial or collector. We're kind of focused on transit corridors, but really corridors of all types. And then in terms of what we are referring to as an underutilized site, we are looking at sites that are not being used to its full potential. This includes vacant lots as well as unoccupied buildings or areas used for low intensity purposes such as parking lots that do not align with the surrounding urban context or public infrastructure investment. So that's kind of how we are characterizing underutilized sites. And we're looking at a lot of different types. So just to give you some examples of some of the types of underutilized sites or opportunity sites that we see across the city. One, obviously, that we hear a lot about is malls. Some of our malls are very healthy, active, have a lot of retail activity. Others are seeing less activity and more underutilized portions of the site. And some have a mix, they have some portions that are very well trafficked and well utilized, and then, some kind of outlying parcels that have almost no activity. Hotels, office, obviously huge changes in the office market. So we do see some underutilized office in Tucson, probably less so than some other cities that's a really strong trend. Tucson has been a little less hard hit by that, but we do have out-of-date office. Hospitals, that's kind of like a larger campus type use. And then for more like smaller and medium scale sites, small scale commercial development, kind of a single building on a site. We're looking at medium scale strip centers with or without a large anchor. So we see kind of the large strip development with often an anchor like big box retail, but there's also strip commercial without a large anchor. We're looking at some of those small scale strips that have very limited parking that can make it really challenging to redevelop. So trying to look at a variety of sites that all have unique needs that we want to try to help solve for with zoning changes. Some of the other sites we've looked at, it could include churches or religious institutions, religious uses. We've seen some redevelopment of those sites across the city, so want to be mindful that that's kind of a growing trend, is especially affordable housing on religious sites. Some of our commercials have single family. Actually, a lot of our corridors in Tucson have single family residential uses, which usually are less likely to redevelop, but in some cases could be sites for redevelopment. Vacant lots, of course, and parking lots. These are just some examples to give you a sense of the kind of range of different types of underutilized sites that we're looking at as part of this analysis, and to look at strategies to support redevelopment. So some of the barriers we identified through analysis and stakeholder discussions will come as no surprise to this group, but parking minimums comes up over and over as a key challenge. Also, restrictions or maximums around building heights and setbacks, density restrictions, minimum lot size, maximum lot coverage, use restrictions in some cases, and change of use requirements. Other barriers, not zoning related, but more process related, that we heard, especially through discussions with stakeholders, were discretionary processes such as design review or zoning processes create uncertainty. There can be opposition to new projects and kind of conflicting goals within our community. And conflicting goals, even at the policy level at times in our community, that can make it challenging to especially go through some of those discretionary processes that require public involvement. Also, we hear about challenges around impact fees and how the structure of our impact fees can disincentivize redevelopment and infill development, especially new multifamily. So some of the potential tools that we're looking for to address these barriers and challenges that have been identified are to explore a regulatory approach that can apply to corridors citywide. So we're really looking for citywide tools here, where in the past a lot of our overlays have been very specific to corridors. What we're trying to do here is something a little broader to really unlock development opportunity across the city. So we're looking at potentially a redevelopment option in zoning that would be kind of A secondary development option as an alternative to the current zoning, or based on the current zoning, but with some additional options that would be based on proximity to transit or other criteria. And using that option, you know, a development would have more flexibility related to parking, setbacks, density, lot coverage, building heights, some of those aspects. Also looking at reduced parking minimums on sites close to transit to better reflect parking demand, and just allow that parking to be tailored to the use on the context. Some of the other tools we're looking at are bonuses for affordable housing. So that could be density bonuses, that could be removing density caps in housing, it could be height bonuses, but some additional incentives for affordable housing, given that we know some of the financial calculations are unique for affordable housing. Development standards to facilitate the construction of tiny homes and the full spectrum of housing types, so making it easier to do smaller lot development and small home development. And then reduction of barriers to adaptive reuse of existing buildings, and simplification of conflicting or convoluted processes. So again, how do you simplify the development process that can, you know, bring a lot of uncertainty to processes. So what we're working on right now in this, so that was kind of the analysis phase that I went through. And right now what we're working on is kind of fine tuning some of these strategies and potential tools by looking at actual sites. So we picked 6 opportunity sites across the city and tried to hit a lot of those different typologies that I shared before. So strip commercial, a mall site, a vacant site, a lot of different types of sites. And we're looking at different development scenarios on each of those sites to test, you know, what is the feasibility of doing multifamily, of doing a mix of housing types on this site, doing a mixed use development. And then, you know, kind of doing some of the ideal case scenario developments, but then what are the barriers in zoning and some of these tools that I just went over, would those actually help achieve this type of development? That is what we've heard aligns with our community goals around mixed use and affordable housing. So that's the stage we're at right now, is working on these development scenarios. And then from there, we will be developing more specific code recommendations or a set of recommendations for code updates. So this is the timeline. We've kind of gone through the, I know it's a little hard to see up there. So phase 1 was discovery, and that was really the analysis. And we presented a lot of what I just shared today to Mayor and Council last October, and got direction to continue moving forward. We're now in phase 2 on there, which says evaluation. And that's where we're really doing the site testing and site analysis. The next phase is to actually develop the code proposal and get public feedback. That's really through this summer. And then the final phase, phase 4, is public review and adoption. So that would be going to Planning Commission and Mayor and Council with these proposals, which will include public hearings and additional opportunity for public input. So that's where we're at with this. We really want feedback from this group in particular today, but also throughout this process, and would love to get input from many of you, and you know, would love to see many of you. We'll need a lot of support as we go through this process, through the public process. So really love to input.
Thank you, Corin. I think a great presentation. I think it's going to actually make a huge, you're able to do some of the things you're talking about, it's going to make a huge impact. Those questions, Mark?
I don't have a question, but feedback is really difficult for me to give any direct feedback today based upon the fact that I really couldn't read any of that. And so if there's a way to get it out,
Yeah.
That would be really helpful. So that's the first thing. I do have a question, and I'm wondering, as I understand it, there's one or more bills currently at the legislature that are looking specifically at some of these areas. I understand, you know, given that the governor vetoed one last week, there's some question about what's actually ultimately going to come out. But have you banged any of this against? Because I know some of that was adaptive reuse of malls and service centers, and have you looked at that stuff?
Yeah, so one that was adopted, I think several weeks ago, was to allow residential and any commercial zone. So we already allow that in Tucson. I think there's just some other jurisdictions, all of our commercial zones allow multifamilies and our office zones as well. There's a few other bills that are still, I think, under consideration. Some of them would definitely be, a change from what's permitted in Tucson. I mean, I think our perspective and, at least in our level is that, you know, we agree with a lot of the goals. Obviously, we're trying to address supply issues, housing supply issues in Tucson, but we really want us to be locally driven so that it can be tailored to the needs of our community in Tucson. So that's why we're really trying to develop these types of tools, so that it can include local input and local public involvement, but can really help move the needle in terms of facilitating more affordable housing and workforce housing. So that's really kind of strategy we're taking is we want the solutions to be locally driven. Yeah, we're tracking a lot of the state bills, and we'll be analyzing those and then we will.
Hi, yeah, this is great. I'd love to be able to read that up close. So
Yes, hopefully Neto can circulate it.
under the existing tools, it said reduce parking for small scale multifamily.
Yeah.
What does the city consider small scale?
Great question, because that was for very small scale.
Yeah.
It's really for 4 units or less, you can reduce the parking where it's 1 space per unit. Other multifamily can reduce parking for the individual parking plan. It's just that's kind of like an automatic reduction for the very small scale. That was really to facilitate like the kind of very small lot infill, where the parking was a huge challenge. Larger scale multifamily can always do an individual parking plan if you're a 1/4 mile from transit, or if it's an affordable housing development. And the individual parking plan allows you to, you know, propose a parking level that meets the needs of the development and explains, you know, how you're taking advantage of other transportation modes and things like that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the
Yeah.
variance process, but I'm just wondering if this could be a consideration in part of that package, is that you know, we're reduced parking minimums on sites close to transit is great, but also I think another piece of that is to consider the population that's being served. So if that can be wrapped into some of your discussion, I think that would be a good discussion and good direction.
Yeah.
And regarding the barriers on those outlying corridors, I think one of the big barriers is the pointage for tax credit. If they're not located
For lifetime.
and yeah, so it, you know, it directs almost everything, which is such a sin, but that's part of, I think, the barrier. The other barrier in those corridors are the height restrictions. So, but I think pointage, you know, looking at points is something to consider for these outlying corridors.
At the state level.
I have a question. We'll open it up for everybody else first before I go.
I guess I'm curious, thanks for sharing, of the 6 opportunity sites. You showed like a few different types. Which are those opportunity sites hitting, or which are seeing this process?
So we have, like a mall site, we have a couple that are like strict commercial, I would say, vacant sites, and like office, kind of underutilized office. And then some like a, small commercial strip center. And you know, I think it's kind of too early to really have takeaways, but I think the larger sites are easier to develop, but that's one of the things we're really trying to do with this is look at what are some of the tools that can help make it easier to develop those smaller challenging sites, because we have a lot of those across the city that have like split zoning and you know, maybe not ideal site conditions. So we're trying to look at different types of sites so we can come up with, you know, have multiple strategies basically. But we'll be sharing some of that after this phase. And yeah, so we'll have a lot more to share soon.
You want me to go or you want to do another question? You want to go? Go ahead.
You mentioned the barrier, first, thank you for doing this presentation, I appreciate that. You mentioned the barrier of the, development fees. And was wondering if you're looking more at like having this as an incentive for building affordable housing or actually reducing those fees.
So I mentioned, yeah, impact fees came up as a disincentive. The city is looking at updating our impact fee structure right now. That's the city manager's office that's doing that, and that is, you know, that's the kind of feedback we think will be really valuable as part of the impact fee conversation is, you know, what kind of structure could incentivize the type of development we want. Yeah.
So are you saying that comments should be made to the city manager?
Yeah, I can take that back and, if it's something you guys are interested in, we can, you know, HCD could probably request that the city manager's office and give a presentation on the impact fee process. And I'm gonna touch on development fees in just a second. Development review fees, which are different, I'll explain.
I can see that being a place that we did make a stance of. And like, I would definitely want to say, like, it's not just reduce impact fees per se, but like use those to help guide and incentivize the kind of development that we want.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go. So I've got, thank you for, I think it's a great presentation. Appreciate it. So this is a totally out of the box question. But you know, our zoning code is so complicated and it's been around for so long and there's been so many rezones and everything. And like that split zoning issue you're talking about is a huge issue because there's a lot of parcels in town where half of it's zoned one thing, the other half is zoned something else. And trying to figure out how to make those work, it's just, it becomes really, really complicated. And you know, one of the problems with trying to come up with a new zoning overlay is everybody, all these buildings and all these things are grandfathered in, right? And is it possible to have two different zoning types for one parcel? And the reason I ask is keep the existing zoning, is it possible to keep the existing zoning on all the parcels because they're zoned for a specific use, but then to take a more holistic look of, you know, flexible zoning across larger swaths of land that, you know, as long as you meet one of the two types of zones, is that kind of what you're thinking?
That I like the way you said that, because that's kind of what we're looking at. Because
Okay.
like you said, it's very challenging to change the existing zoning because things are grandfathered. We have various state statutes that make it hard to do that. We're kind of, the way our overlays work basically is you can either use your existing zoning or you can use the overlay.
Yeah.
We're kind of thinking of it similarly, but without creating an overlay, it would basically be the transit oriented development option, so that if you're close to transit, you could use that option. And like you said, it's more holistically, maybe looks at the site more comprehensively and allows more density, more height, more flexibility, less parking, those kind of things. If certain criteria are met, it's close to transit, maybe some other criteria. But yeah, that's a way that we see a potential avenue to create more flexible zoning.
Okay, I think that's great. I can tell you guys from experience, you know, I've been looking at two different sites that have that split zoning and it's just, it costs go crazy and there's no reason for it, so.
And the split zoning is something that has come up and we're looking for solutions on it.
So I do think it'd be great if we weighed in on the impact fees, and I'm not gonna talk too much about that right now, but I think that's something as a commission, I think that would be beneficial for us to do. So the last question is the new building code, the 24 code. What is the plan for implementing that? Is there a plan? Do you think it's gonna happen this year? Do you think it's next year? What's your?
So the 2024 building codes are under review right now by the Joint Code Committee. So the Tucson Kima County Joint Code Committee is a joint committee that reviews building codes for our region because we try to adopt them in sync with the county. So that committee has been meeting monthly to review like the different, you know, chapters or books, if you will, sections of the code. And you know, they're having discussions and deliberation. There's also opportunity for public comment at those meetings. I can share the schedule of meetings with the whole commission, so folks can participate if you'd like to, and, you know, each agenda, it'll say which aspects they're looking at that meeting. Our schedule has us kind of reviewing those through like September. I mean, there's like 10 different codes or something through September, I think, September, October, and then it would potentially go to mayor and council for review and potential adoption at the beginning of next year. But obviously it will depend on the types of comments we get from the public, any, you know, analysis we need to do, but it is the plan to adopt it early next year. We usually do adopt on a every 6 year cycle.
So just to kind of bring everybody up to speed on this, this is something that's been on my radar for a little while. So the International Building Code gets released every 3 years. Almost every city skips one release. So the city of Tucson is on the 2018 code. We skipped the 2021, the 2024 code just got released. There are significant changes in the 24 code. And based on some presentations that I've seen, I've tried to estimate what is the impact to construction costs with the new code. And I think it's somewhere between $15,000 to $25,000 per apartment. It is a significant impact. And my concern with bringing that code in is if we do a bunch of things that make it easier, but then throw the code in, it's going to continue to create challenges in terms of building housing. So, I would like to, your person, I think that's doing that reached out, I need to follow up.
One of our building officials is working on it with county, building officials and ICE. So, I mean, potentially if we could have them come through a presentation as well, if that's something that's of interest. I can also just, we can also just share the schedule of meetings if folks would like to attend.
Also, what would we do about it if we heard about it? I mean, you know, is there something we could actually do?
If you had specific questions, they may be able to answer some of them. I mean, I would say, Jim, those kind of estimates, if you have them and are willing to share, would be very useful for that committee, but for others as well, mayor and council, you know, even for us to review and be able to dig into a little bit, that would be great to see your calculation. Okay.
Might just, so again, this is kind of like a process procedural type comment, but I feel like information trickles into us constantly. Is there a way that we can just get information consistently? And it's a little frustrating because a lot of us are in housing, we receive bits and pieces from here, and then we receive bits and pieces from here. And then we sit on panels with folks and we receive bits and pieces. And then I come here and I receive bits and pieces. But there's no cohesiveness to the information that we receive, and the goals that we've set in our respective subcommittees. I feel like those goals might be repetitive, they might be, you know, but we just don't know. So it makes some of our work futile, at least it makes me feel like our work is futile at times. And I don't know how we improve upon that other than consistent and attentive information exchange. But even like, you know, we were talking recently, we all agreed from this retreat that we would have regular staff assigned to our subcommittees. Well, if the staff never comes, it's, you know, which we're back to again. So we're having constructive talks, we're doing the work that we need to be doing collectively in our subcommittees, but again, it's not getting communicated back. And I feel like we're constantly spinning our wheels.
Yeah, Martin shared that with me. I agree, we need to fix that. So let's talk offline. I'm open to.
Yeah, it's not just subcommittee. I mean, sitting here, you know, you've got the bits and pieces about the code. I mean, I don't know how we can holistically do our work if we have bits and pieces.
Yeah,
how do we get a comprehensive exchange of information?
That one's kind of a hot button for me. I've been working on it for a while, but I'm happy to share it with the group here. So I don't know.
Please do.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Well, I had two questions, or comments, I guess. In terms of the concern about pointage, is that what you call it?
Yeah, I made up a new word.
In terms of pointage, or actually using the low income housing tax credit program in Arizona to drive a lot of these decisions. I'm not entirely sure that I would want us as a criteria, while I believe that LIHTC is an important source of funding. I'm not sure I would think that for me would be the most important criteria for some of these kind of decisions. But I don't know, because I'm not sure what else we're looking at. It's also possible if we look, for instance, and we're successful at a big bond issue, we might be looking at other money. And so just from that's I think the first question, and then to the question of the building codes. While I understand cost is an important driver, I don't know what those changes are. And universal design criteria, for instance, I think probably 20 years ago was worth paying for, even though I'm sure it cost people more money. And so if we're gonna take a position on something like that, I would personally need a lot more information about what's in it.
And I wasn't suggesting that the commission,
Huh?
I wasn't suggesting that the commission take a position on it. I probably should have.
I have a question. Are the outlying corridors, are they in areas where there are parks and schools and, easy transportation and, right, so, I think this may be a point even for, a bond, is that tax credit pays for these kinds and we don't have money, your taxes are gonna pay for these kinds, I don't know, but I wish that we could get, Southern Arizona and metropolitan Phoenix with different points, but we just have to look at how does that get funded? How do these projects get funded? Because we certainly can't go into debt.
So yeah, the financing, I think, is another piece to think about. How does the zoning kind of line up with some of the financing options out there?
And for the other part of the conversation we just had, I'm all for nominating Jim to go to these code meetings and come back and report to the group.
They're happy to do that. Okay, so just in the interest of time.
One thing I just wanted to quickly mention, is the development review fees, because this also came up last time. So, just to let you guys know what's happening with development review fees, and these are fees for all building permits or site plans, any sort of development reviews that are required for development. In January of this year, Mayor and Council began that process to update our development review fees, which hadn't been done in some time. So they gave that notice of intent in January. The fee increase was to be 3.5% in July of this year and 3.5% next year. So basically 7% that's spread out over 2 years. However, during the outreach and engagement process, we found an inconsistency in our fee structure for building permits. So we reposted and have extended the notice period. We just redid that notice in April. Mayor and Council adopted a revised notice of intent. So the proposed increases is sometimes a little smaller or greater than 3.5% for certain permit fees, but in general, it's a 3.5% increase. We just had to tweak some things in order to correct that inconsistency. And then I want to just reiterate that development impact fees are not included with this fee proposal. So this is just for the fees to review and issue building permits, not impact fees. So the new timeline now is to have a mayor and council public hearing June 18th. And then the potential effective date of the revised fee schedule would be July 1. There's a QR code there if you would like to review the fee schedule, the proposed fee schedule, and share your feedback.
Great, thank you. Any other final questions or comments?
Just had a quick one, just to piggyback off your question on the code side. You had a slide that mentioned.
Can you announce who are you?
I'm Kevin Quinn. I was invited by Cassie London of Pima County, and I'm not sure if it's the right meeting here, but I believe it is. This is for affordable housing. We are a MEP engineering firm, NEPFP, so HVAC.
What's your name? I'm sorry.
Kevin Quinlan,
Quinley, okay.
yeah.
Go ahead and ask the question.
So yeah, just piggybacking off the code question, I'm in agreement with you in terms of the cost. But there was a slide up here that had some outline in terms of finding exceptions to speed up or delay roadblocks in the construction and permitting process. Is there any work being done to sort of qualify perhaps what code exceptions might be relevant to bring down costs and to also keep housing here safe and compliant? I guess that was kind of my first question to get back off.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at what are some of those barriers, whether it's process or code, and how can we create solutions and tools to expedite, so bring down the time to build, but also make it easier to build on more sites, and to build more housing on those sites than what's currently permitted.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of the type of tools we're looking at with the corridor redevelopment tools.
And as well as adaptive reuse, I think particularly adaptive reuse, trying to find codes that are not prohibitive. I think trying to find value-driven solutions, which I very much think adaptive reuse buildings could be a good fit, but also finding the code exceptions that are relevant for this those types of applications. I guess one other question in terms of the permitting process, is there an expedited process for these types of facilities that that's being developed or thought about?
So one of the things we are working on is sort of an expedited process for affordable housing. So that was one of the other recommendations from the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development to their council last year, and that's something we are working on, and we can bring an update at a future meeting, I think to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee first and then to the full commission. So that's something we can bring an update on shortly. We've been working on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other final comments or questions?
Yeah, Vicky has
Vicky, go ahead, Vicky.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment, especially since we're talking about changes. And I'm not looking for an answer today, but I just want to point out that there is a disconnect often between what is in the code and what building inspectors are looking at. And this has come up multiple times around accessibility, because as you know, there's compliance with the various federal laws. But when it comes to building code, and local, that's what inspectors are looking at. And we found that even though the city has adopted accessibility standards into building code, inspectors are not looking at that. And so, I mean, it's an ongoing advocacy issue with us, but when we're talking about, affordable housing, and we have so many people with various disabilities who can't find affordable, accessible housing, I think this is really important to point out.
Thank you for mentioning that, Vicky. And if you're ever aware of a specific site where that's not being addressed or enforced, please feel free to let me know so that we can look into it, because we do enforce ADA requirements.
Yeah.
That's what we're always looking for. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. You're aware of that.
And I'm not sure who's talking. I would love to.
Oh, it's Corin.
Oh, is it Corin? Okay. Yeah.
Services. So that is our purview to review for that on building plans and then inspect to make sure that what's built is in compliance with the plans and in compliance with ADA. So if there's ever a specific site where you feel like that's not being enforced, please let me know so we can correct that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it, because and I want to be clear too, for the record, this doesn't happen just in Tucson. It is an issue across the country where this is happening. And so then there are all these sites that aren't compliant, and then owners are saying, but we got our permit, or, we got our occupancy license, and why didn't the city or whatever the municipality pointed out? And come to find out that either the accessibility wasn't written into the building code, or inspectors are just not thoroughly inspecting. And that's what we've found here, that it is written into the code, but it's not, doesn't seem to be a standard process part of inspection, that aspect. So I'll follow up with you, Corin.
That'd be great. Thanks, Vicki.
So
just
one final comment from.
In the spirit of making amends, I would just want to say, if I would have read all of my emails, I would have discovered that Corin's presentation had been mailed out.
Oh, did it?
And so, never mind. Sorry.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so it is 4:57. I want to make sure we get through the CEHD goals. So does anybody have any objection with moving on to the next agenda item? Okay. So we're going to jump back to agenda item number 3, which is the CEHD goals. Connie and Colleen.
Great, thanks. Good to see you all again. Okay, so we have on the screen, I don't know, can you all see it? We need to minute. I have copies too. You have copies? Oh, yeah, next one. Okay. So there's 3 subcommittee goals or sets of goals, and then there's the mission. We're going to start with subcommittee goals that, as we understand, I've already gone through the subcommittees and you incorporated the comments and you have like a final proposed set. So on the, well, we'll get it in a second, but on the screen is, say, starting with affordable housing, and the top are the proposed new goals or the revised goals, and then in the italics is your previous goals. So let's just, what we're gonna do is we'll just take a minute for everybody to read it. And they're coming around, if you can't see up over there. And then the idea would be, if there's any edits, you can propose them, but we want you to ideally just all agree to this. But knowing that the subcommittees, at least those that were able to make the meeting, were in agreement with the ones that you're gonna be repealing. And then we'll circle back to the mission.
I'll just say for the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, the first 2 haven't changed. Number 3, we added what we were hoping to approve today as a goal, which is the 15,000 affordable housing units by 2030. So as opposed to having an X in that spot.
No, that is in there.
Yeah, no, that was a change that was made.
He's right.
I'm just summarizing the changes. And then the 4th goal is a new goal.
So take a minute and let us know if there's any proposed further changes.
Not for housing first.
Okay, on affordable housing subcommittee. No, we're all good with this. So let's move to the next goal area, subcommittee, which is equitable housing strategies. If you want to review that one. And if somebody wants to speak to it, if needed, subcommittee leader or not. If there's any to explain, you don't need to. Everybody can just read it.
I don't feel the need to explain unless somebody's got a question.
Just let it speak for itself. Sounds good. Any questions or edits suggested? All right. Okay, then the last one is housing first. You got a comment? No changes. Oh, no changes. That's fine. Oh, it's fine. That's what you were saying. Okay, good. Any others?
Just a question about capitalization of housing first. I see first capitalized ones. Housing first. It's usually seen it capitalized as like a name. How did that go?
I'm just generally talking about it as an idea. And it should not be capitalized. The F in first on the second one should not be capitalized.
So not the H or the F on, correct? So in the header, it's more of a header capitalization. Okay. Okay. Any other? Is there something you're? Oh, no,
I think it was good.
you was very intense. You did.
No, I was trying to understand the difference between one and two.
Okay, so, so we're gonna just share, we have a hand up. Maggie,
Just for the Housing First Subcommittee, recommend, do we want to identify who we want to recommend to? Policies, the program, I'm just. Because it could be recommend to the commission, recommend to mayor and council. Ultimately, who do we want to
We've been
recommend?
operating the last two meetings under the assumption that we recommend to the commission, the commission makes recommendations to the mayor.
yeah, well, the first one, affordable housing, number 4 says make recommendations to mayor and council.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should keep it consistent. So the recommendation should be made to CEHD
And
for consideration to mayor and council.
Jim, you want that to say make recommendation to CHD
For consideration to mayor and council.
So you could even like in the house first, have that at the top, then colon, and then first two repeating.
Yeah, so same thing with equitable housing strategies. Second one, to CEHD for consideration to mayor and council.
Right, okay. All right, so with those, that correction for consistency, so would you want it like that, like the recommendation, the way that it is on the screen, can you see it? Make recommendations to CHD for consideration, mayor and council on 1, policies.
Yeah.
Programs,
Makes sense.
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, be like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's not all today on the screen.
So that would be on the affordable housing subcommittee, that would be a number 1 and number 4.
Up there. Oh, yeah, it would be number 1 and 4. For consideration by? Well, they don't all have to change like
Consideration
to mayor and council.
to mayor and council.
To mayor, okay. Like that.
That was, so, and the last one was passing first. Is that first line,
Oh, yeah. Like that.
yeah, looks like it all goes together.
Yeah, okay, that's good, good. Okay. And then the only other one is with the equitable housing number 1.
2.
To CHD, yeah, sorry. 2, yeah. Oh, looks like that was good. Okay. All right, so, since we're new to this process and coming from our other commission, we have been using like a consensus-based approach to how the council operates, where but with still maintaining the kind of the voting traditional approach. So what we do is we have discussion, and then we would gauge from you if there's anybody who can't agree, who has, concerns. And then we look, and everybody does a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on the left side. Full support, agree without reservations, 2, agree with some reservations, 3, which like if you're ever doing a thumb kind of consensus would be kind of to the side. I don't really support it, but I'm not gonna block it. All that counts as a yes vote. And then 4, do not agree would be the no vote. Well, 3 would be abstain, and 4 is no vote. And so it gets recorded the way it needs to, but it just, for big things like goals, where you really do want everybody to be on board versus just a majority vote. So in this case, with this edit, we can make sure the language got perfectly like in there with this consideration stuff. That it looks like you all agree, number 1, you're all good with it.
This is for the subcommittees.
This is just subcommittees. So we want to just like, this one has fewer edits, so it seems like it's gonna be easier. So we just want to say, okay, seems like you all agree. We've already checked in on any concerns. And so that would be a recommendation. And just to clarify, you all as the commission have the ability to make this decision. These are your goals as opposed to language like really in the mission.
Okay, so
Is that
I
correct?
think what we need to do is we need to make a motion to approve the subcommittee goals as written.
As now written in
As
the,
now written in the document. So I would like to make that
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
Ray made the motion.
I second it. It's Mindy.
Thank you, Mindy.
second.
Okay, so a motion's been made and seconded to revise the subcommittee goals as written, screen. Is there any discussion before we put this question? Okay, so. as
We
the
just did the
procedure-
discussion, yeah.
What's that? Yeah, so are you suggesting that we have everybody vote 1, 2, 3, 4, or do you want to just, like, typically just say yes or no or abstain?
Yeah, I mean, only if there's a lot of discussion.
Yeah, there's
Give
a lot,
that little-
so-
In this case, we know, boom, we've already done the discussion. But then you can do the motion and it just wraps it up.
Okay, so is there any other comments before we put the question? Okay, Maggie? Maggie, you're on mute.
Oops, yes, aye.
Okay, I think Wendy is still absent. Mary Ann?
Yeah, one.
Okay, Mindy?
One.
What was that, Mindy?
Agree, yes.
Okay, Mark?
One of the ones, or both.
Both, well, I got both.
Vicky?
I, yes.
Okay, thank you, Lori.
Yes.
Tisha?
Yes.
Ray?
Yes.
Kenny?
Yes.
And Jay?
Yes.
Okay, you guys have it.
So now on to the mission, where there's a few more comments. And so it's on here, just. Oh, but this is, okay, so you can't really tell what's red.
Oh, it's not in
color. So.
But it's okay, oh, there it is.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
All right, how? All right, so again, red is what you guys, with the comments from the retreat, blue were added after.
Added after by.
They were added after into the online document as suggested comments by various.
Because it was shared for all of
It was a
you.
shared document, and some of the suggestions were anonymous as they come up in Google Docs, so I guess it would be up to whoever suggested them if they want to speak to them or own them.
I think we also put in comments in our, we just went over this in our subcommittee, so
Right,
that's when we would have added comments, I think.
Okay, maybe that's where they came from.
I think both of those in blue are from the Equitable Housing Subcommittee.
So this one and this one, okay. Okay, that's good to know. We couldn't tell who they were from.
so let's just take it real quick. The opening paragraph has one. Is that fine? Anybody have a problem with that? Can you see it okay? We go one at a time. And it is as it reads, the cross out on your page, you can, it's still there.
So I'm sorry, this is Vicky. I'm not clear on your question.
The first paragraph, the commission will review, investigate, recommend. Cross out to increase, add in that all Tucsonans, blah, blah, blah. That is, does anybody have any problem with that?
No.
That part. Okay,
What about online?
so then one doesn't have any changes. Number two. Number two.
Just don't like that.
I'm a little uncomfortable with that nonsense.
Do you want to say more about that?
I think it's confrontational. And, you know, maybe that can be something that's in the protected barrios, but we're accusing the city of Tucson of inflicting harm, and I don't buy it.
What's an example?
Yeah.
What's an example?
Like the Tucson Convention Center, and like the demolition of homes there that is entering into convention center.
And so this is then saying if we agree that the Tucson Convention Center inflicted harm, on a population, then we want the city to repair that harm.
I think that's the recommendation is that like, as we're looking at ways that the city's involved in housing justice now is like look at the disproportionate impacts that have happened and try to specify our support to repairing that kind of harm.
My concern is, you know, that this sentence, the way it's written, may think people have a legal right and can ask for money and things like that, so I hear what you're saying and I understand it totally, and I know what the convention center did. But I just don't like the wording of that and what it implies in general.
Vicky also has her hand up.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said on this. I have a suggested edit though, because I understand what it's trying to get at. I wonder about combining those two. So my suggestion is keep the first sentence, protect barrios and communities from rapid change and displacement, as well as structural disinvestment, and advocate for efforts to repair any harm. So basically just get rid of specify the harm the city of Tucson has inflicted. I just wonder if that would make it better, because I think what the important part of that is to advocate for the ways to repair any harm that has been done or could be done. Anyway, that's my suggestion.
I guess I also, just to kind of, thinking about this is that I think if we're not willing to recognize the harm and understand the harm that has happened in the past, I think it's very challenging then to create more equitable policies, because I don't think we have to look at equitable policies and make policies more equitable without recognizing that the reason we're even having that conversation is because, whether it's at the city level, the county level, the state level, that those harms were caused by government institutions in large part. It wasn't the only thing, but I think there needs to be a recognition, and even in just that first sentence, noting that there's structural disinvestment, that's what that is. That's the city having done harm to places in the way that they allocated funding, right? So, I think by looking at equity and making things more equitable, you're repairing harm, So I think that's where we just want to be explicit about what it means to go from a place of inequity to a place where things are more equitable.
So maybe what you're just saying is, a sentence could be recognizing past harms.
Versus specify, recognizes.
Recognizing past harms, then advocating for efforts to repair that and eliminate any future harm.
Yeah, I prefer to be future looking. This feels punitive. I don't think that's our job as a commission.
But what you're saying is true.
Right, what has been punitive is what happened before. So the whole idea of the commission is to look to the future to make things more equitable.
Right, so I do believe you can recognize past harms and then create equitable policy that
So basically, we're just saying,
repairs that harm and eliminates future harm.
so it's recognize instead of specify, essentially.
Yeah, just recognize past harms.
Yeah.
Mindy?
Thank you. I have three things that I'm thinking about. The word mitigate might feel better here instead of repair. And as we're talking about this, it brings up a question that I had about the corridors and how they're being developed. With driving down some of those corridors and seeing that there are single residence family homes there, and I'm curious about that. And currently I am watching historical properties, like in the Miracle Mile area, the beautiful old cottages, hotels that were part of Tucson are being demolished. And right there is a piece of our history that is gone. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. So this isn't a past issue. I mean, it's a current issue.
Okay, thank you, Mindy. Vicky?
Yeah, just two things. I just would like to remind everybody to try not to talk over each other. It's difficult with the captions. And I'm having a hard time following all the suggested edits, so I just wanted to ask, once everybody has their suggestions, if you have like to read the suggested full version. And I don't necessarily have an issue with the term mitigate, but I do want to point out that repair and mitigate mean very different things. So I'm not sure what we, want to recommend. I think mitigate softens it, but it definitely is not the same thing as repair.
Is repair past to mitigate for future harms? Or no?
Well, to me, repair is fix. Whereas mitigate is to lessen the effects of something. And so that doesn't necessarily mean you're completely solving the problem. I mean, that's my perspective, and how I think that's why a lot of laws use the term mitigate.
Do we even need those words? If we're recognizing past harms and we're creating that equitable policies that address those and eliminate future harm.
I'm not sure. I'm still chewing on the repair versus mitigate. I think some, because I think it's hard to repair that harm. And part of me wants to be like, yeah, let's actually talk about what repair looks like. And part of me is like, let's not hold that as like an expectation. And we're a commission that's making recommendations to mayor and council. We're not actually legally liable to the city. For me, like, none of this is, I forgot the word. I would say it's like, we're not throwing shade on the city. We're not, for me, this isn't a judgment on the city. It's not at all about like even negativity towards the city. To me, like recognizing what's been done, like I think our city housing and community development is awesome. I think they're doing great things for the community. And for me to be able to recognize the harm that's been done, for me, that's part of actually building trust to be what we want to be today, to say like, we see that and we recognize it and we're going to hold ourselves accountable to that. You see it at these meetings sometimes where people are coming and they're like, well, what about this? You did this. How are we going to trust you today? And for me, it's to be able to say, you can trust us today because we saw that and we made changes and we're going to hear the hurt and we're going to repair that and we're going to do something differently.
So going back to my original question, so the example, the convention center, how do you repair that?
That is a great question. And I think that's maybe, Jay, I'd love to hear from you on this, but this part of, for me, like working with the, for the city to be doing some of that investigation of how the harm has been happening. I know one lawsuit that happened with, we talked about this in the last meeting, could you talk about that lawsuit? I don't know all the details.
About the foreclosure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a lawsuit by the National Fair Housing Alliance against several of the largest banks in the country about how they maintained foreclosed properties during the foreclosure crisis in white neighborhoods versus non-white neighborhoods. And the difference was stark. So there was a lawsuit. Tucson was one of the communities that has received funding from the settlement of that lawsuit. So.
And all the people who received funding from that had to focus their efforts on Black and Latino families. So they were like really trying to support special
purpose credit programs.
Thank you. That would
disproportionately benefit Black and Latino families, to try to say like, this isn't just for any low income family, because it's not just distributed in a race blind way, but this is specifying for the harm.
So, I think just to back up, we are an advisory commission. We're just advising. The city can totally ignore us. So that being said, you know, putting in specific words, I wouldn't hesitate around the use of a word because we're advising, right? So, that's my first thought on any hesitation behind specific words. And I think that we can, as a commission, define our lens. And I think this is our lens, right? So repair might be advocating for or recommending one of the barriers or potential impediments to future development, taking into account this 80 acres or 100? 80 acres that was completely destroyed during the first part of urban renewal and second phase, the Tucson Convention Center, and recognizing and seeing that those disinvested areas now are low opportunity, high vulnerability areas. And the displacement of the economic center at the time. So we have this, we have scholars and historians who have documented this, we have data to support this. So this is our lens, this is our recognition, and this is our lens. And we, as a commission, move forward in making sure that our recommendations take that into account positively and negatively, right? Positively, and perhaps you should consider this because this happened. And negatively, in that we recognize this, therefore this is needed to account for that. So I don't think, so I think when people see repair, they think of reparations, monetary, right? Repair has so many different connotations and definitions. But a city there might be a model out there that said, this is what we're going to do to compensate for our urban renewal. So we also don't want to limit ourselves to making a recommendation to the city. Again, commend the city for all this work. I mean, it is so incredibly brave and courageous that we even have a commission that's able to say these things, right? So I don't think that our words should stand in the way of the great work that's being done.
So there was a comment about inequities versus harm as a term. So right now it's just noted next to it.
A comment in the chat
In
to
the
use
chat?
inequity instead of harm.
So my second comment would be,
Okay.
Jim, perhaps subcommittees are the best place to vet this conversation.
Yeah,
May I please add something?
yes, Vicky, go ahead.
I just want to point out, the more I look at these, and I think it was something Jim said at the very beginning about, being forward thinking. I understand all perspectives, but in reading these, this one really stands out because the other three are definitely forward thinking. And I understand what Jay was saying, like we do have to recognize what's happened in the past. I mean, that's true for anything, right? Because you don't want to stay stuck there, or, we don't recognize it and move forward, then we're destined to repeat it. But my question is, why is it so necessary in this one and not in the others? Because when we get to the next one about, affordable and accessible quality housing, why wouldn't we then have a statement about recognizing past harms to disabled people and people who are unhomed or anyone who has been discriminated against? So I think that there's not consistency in how these are written. So that's my issue with number 2.
Can I ask something? I wonder if any of the city staff have thoughts on this one, since this is more talking about the city of Tucson, and how do you feel as city staff if this were part of or not part of the commission's.
Sure, so happy to hop in here. I think that there, if we were to look at kind of broader city perspective, I think there is maybe an appreciation and understanding for some of the concern about kind of specify the harm the city of Tucson has inflicted, and I think maybe some of that challenge is like, that's hard to look in the face, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't. So I don't wanna say that that's like should or shouldn't be there. I think it's, I think regardless of whether that language is there, we still need to be accountable to looking that hard part in the face and being different today. I think I really kind of appreciate where Ray and Tish were going, that I don't think that repair is a hard word in here, you know. I think if you want it to be something that is palatable, and I think I also just want to recognize that can also mean diluted, and that may not be your intention. I think to say repairing harm is not something that as a city staff member, I would feel affronted by, or feel like that is an accusation against Dane. To the extent that it were, then we would need to look at that too. So there is that somewhat circular, and really happy to hear from other city folks as well. But mostly just appreciate the conversation and think wherever you land is going to be okay.
And I would just add, I think we do have language in things like PCHIP and HAST about, and I like the exact language, I don't know, but I think have been trying to include language progressively about repairing patterns of segregation and really recognizing that many of those things have come from government. So I think it's consistent with kind of the conversation we've been having, at least in each city.
So
This is our document,
Again.
not the cities.
yeah, so
This is to go to the cities, this is our document.
we have.
I am not comfortable with saying, as a member of this commission, and this being my document as well, specify the harm the city of Tucson has inflicted. I'm just not comfortable with that, you guys.
Guys, we're not gonna solve this right now. I think this is a complex item. I would like to think on it some more, maybe have some more conversations to see if maybe we can figure out a way that works for everybody. I think that's what we can do. So I'd like to suggest that we table this to our next meeting.
Do you want to look at the final two and see if you're in agreement with those really quickly? And if you're not, there's more to discuss. Okay,
Yeah.
so they're gonna be table the whole mission.
Let's table the mission.
But at least you got your goals.
For the next, yes, it was good, that's a win. We're gonna take that win. Absolutely. Are there any objections to us tabling this to the next meeting?
No.
I second your motion, Jim.
Maggie? You have another comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe what we were just discussing about addressing the inequities or the harm or, the past mistakes, maybe it should be in that top paragraph. If you go back to the mission, is based on research and based on also looking backwards so that we don't make the same mistakes going forward, kind of stuff. That's just a suggestion. Maybe it should apply to all of the goals.
Right, okay.
Jim, can we caveat it with the subcommittees take on this discussion individually in their subcommittees?
Yes.
So we can bring up one robust discussion.
I think
in
that
our
would,
commission meeting.
I think that'd be great, and I'm gonna make sure we have our subcommittee updates in our next agenda. Okay, so if everybody's okay, yep.
I have one suggestion for the next meeting too, if we could get the language that's in PASS and anything that the city has already written around this, I think that would be great to bring to the table. And that other commit, was this the city's Office of Equity? That might be another great thing to have on the agenda for this conversation if they're upcoming.
I thought we were gonna get somebody who's gonna be.
So we were talking about having the Reese attend the equitable strategies.
That's right, that's right, okay, that's right. That's right.
Last time, but.
Okay, all right, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I also need to table the mayor and update. Because I had a brain fart and was thinking on the wrong thing. So We have, another agenda item that did not make this agenda, that I thought was gonna be on here, which was to discuss, the goals of having a joint meeting between the city of Tucson's Health Commission and the county's commission. And so I'm gonna ask we add that to our next agenda. Are there any other agenda items that commissioners would like to see on our next meeting?
I would like to, put this on the agenda for the next meeting.
What is that?
This is the Commission on Equitable Housing Development, sorry.
Yeah.
Update to the mayor and
Yeah,
council.
that'll be in there as well. Yeah.
So last meeting, Jim, we had planned on kind of coming back with what our PCHIP process currently looks like and all that. Thinking about these conversations, I think that is a conversation we can absolutely table to a later time to give you space to have these conversations next month, unless people feel that it's urgent to do next month.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions before we adjourn?
We do HTTP updates quickly. They're on the agenda.
Is that on the agenda?
Sure.
Oh,
Wrap up HTTP updates, future agenda. So just a couple of very quick things immediately following this, starting in about 27 minutes. We have, starting in 10 minutes, so you're gonna see city folks start vacating the room. We are kicking off our PCHIP planning process. Really hope that that's right here at the Equitable Neighborhood Center. Really hope that you can stick around.
The activity center.
Activity Center, thank you.
We can walk together.
So really hope you'll stick around for that. Also happening simultaneous, as many know, we worked on a planned area development that is necessary in order for us to use the old M5 Fire Station 8 and convert that into emergency shelter. So at 5:30 today also, that planned area development is going before the zoning examiner for review, and then pending that process would then be going forward to mayor and council for final approval. So when they have that. Also wanted to thank everyone for the support of the letters of support that went from the commission to our congressional delegation related to our current congressional appropriation requests. I know that was a pretty quick turnaround item, so thank you very much. And then lastly, we also have coming up on May 9th at 5:30, we will have a public input meeting at Southside Presbyterian Church related to our development plans for South 10th Avenue. So I encourage you to attend that as well if you're able. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you very much.
that's a lot.
You're telling us.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We are 5:30 folks, we're actually only 4 minutes late, but we're not adjourned. Hey, by the way, I have 4 extra tickets to the grand party on Saturday night at the convention center. If anyone's interested in going,